welcome and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And my name is Tarek Moya, and today I'll be talking to you about my research into increased precipitation and its potential effects on variable turbidity. So, what is turbidity, you might ask? Well, turbidity is the measurement of the relative clarity of a liquid. It is measured in nephelometric turbidity units, otherwise known as NTU, and this is done by means of collecting a water sample and then shining a light through said sample in order to determine the amount of scattered light that is able to pass through it. So, with higher intensity of scattered light passing through the sample, this results then in higher turbidity, as shown here in the slide behind me. As you can see, we have 3 bottles of varying degrees of turbidity, with the one on the left being the clearest with a turbidity level of 5, the next one over with a level of 55, and the next one over with a level of 515. As you can see, it is very milky and very cloudy. So you might be wondering, what about this particular phenomenon would pique my interest? Well, being that I am an avid diver myself, I began to notice that every time that I go on a dive and it was preceded by rainfall, I would begin to notice that the water become very dark and a lot more opaque looking, and the overall visual clarity of the water would diminish. And regardless of whether I was in a lake or a quarry, Banks Channel, or even the ocean. It is for this reason that I became interested in this natural phenomenon, thus leading me to choosing this particular subject matter for my research project. So in turn, I formulated my hypothesis, and my hypothesis is such that an increase in precipitation would have a positive correlation on variable turbidity, resulting in a rise in turbidity, with my null hypothesis being the inverse, that an increase in turbidity and precipitation would have no correlation to an increase on variable turbidity. So, as for my sample area, I chose Monroe County, Florida, an area located near the tip of Key West, Florida. And the reason I chose this location for my sample area was at the time of my study, Hurricane Sandy was passing through, and this would then supply me with an ample and consistent amount of input of precipitation to be used as my independent variable in my study, with turbidity serving as my dependent variable. I set up my experimental design as such. Every day at 0100, starting on September 14th, 2020, running all the way up until October 13th, I would gather my data using the United States Geological Survey website, as this would provide me with real-time data not only for my dependent variable, being turbidity, but also my independent variable as precipitation. And for this, I chose USGS sample sites, Eastside Creek near Lake Ingram, Florida, which can be seen behind me in this general vicinity, as well as Tamiami Canal outlets, Monroe to Carson, Florida, which I use for my independent variable, which is precipitation. So when it came to monitoring precipitation, however, the USGS site provided a variety of data point intervals from which to choose from. As seen here, it offered time intervals ranging from 1 hour to 4 hours to 24 hours to the previous 7 days. And for my research purposes, I chose the 24-hour time period, as this would not only allow me to gather data from that particular moment in time, being the aforementioned 0100 timestamp for my data acquisition, but also it would encompass all the time since my data collection from the prior day. I would then upload my data into a Microsoft Excel sheet structured as so. And here we have the timestamp that the data was collected, as well as the current date, as well as precipitation, which is I then measured in millimeters, and turbidity measured in Formazan nephelometric units, or FNU. And after my month-long investigation, I took the data that I acquired and using Excel's processing ability, I uploaded said data into a line graph as to show the correlation between my independent and dependent variables over time, but also my scatter plot with which I could use to determine if a correlation between variables existed by adding a trend line and calculating an R-squared value. As you see from my line graph with precipitation in gray and turbidity in orange, it appears that there is a positive correlation at times, as shown in the scatter plot. Right behind me, there's a slight positive correlation that can be observed as shown by the trend line with an R-squared value, which was calculated at 0.0326. And based off my findings, I concluded that there was in fact a positive correlation between increased precipitation and increased turbidity. My conclusion was further supported by a variety of other studies that I researched while over the course of my project. One such as one that was conducted in 2013, where researchers in Sweden were monitoring stretches of the Göta älv River and tested to see whether or not precipitation had any effect on turbidity, and in turn, would this then result in higher concentrations of harmful bacterium within the water column that they were testing, such as E. coli and Clostridium. So based off of their findings, they found that in fact that there was with the presence of increased precipitation, there was a 30% increase in turbidity as well, and an exponential increase in harmful bacterium within the water column. Another study that researched also showed that when the researchers began measuring different bodies of river in order to test overall water quality, they found that with increased precipitation, that could in turn lead to a variety of different outcomes, with increased turbidity being a potential factor, but precipitation alone was not cannot be used as a helpful indicator of the increase in turbidity in some cases. In some cases it was, in other cases it wasn't. So, the takeaway. Takeaway from my research is that there is in fact a positive correlation between a rise in precipitation and a rise in turbidity. This can then play into the larger picture of oceanography as it pertains to the physical, not only the physical, but also the chemical aspect of oceanography, as turbidity can in some cases be used as a potential outlier for overall health in the environment and in any given aquatic environment. And that is the end of my slide. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and if you have any questions, please feel free to answer or ask me.